Hello and welcome to the ScriptEase II alpha demo. Today we're going to be building a simple story in ScriptEase II using causes and effects. First I will show you the Neverwinter Nights game world that we will be building our story in. It's modeled after the famous residence of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, 221B Baker Street. You can see in the center here we have Dr. Watson and their landlady Mrs. Hudson. There's also in the top left here the front door, which we will script some game events for. There's also a pile of Sherlock Holmes's books, which will become important later. And in the top right here, we have a trigger placed on the ground with a sound placeable on top of it. Now moving into ScriptEase II, we're going to go to File, New Story. We're going to give it a title of Home Sweet Homes. We're going to give it an author of ScriptEase Team. And a description telling everyone that this is a ScriptEase II demo story. We have to select the game that we're going to be building for, and we have the options here of Pinball and Neverwinter Nights. We're going to choose Neverwinter Nights because that's what we're building in, and then we're going to go and select our game module that we want all of this story to apply to. Going into the Neverwinter Nights directory here, going to find our module file, select that, so we can see that we have a title, author, description specified, as well as the game and the particular module that we'll be building in. We can click Finish, and we have a new story opened up for us. To give you an introduction into the ScriptEase II user interface, in the top left we have the Game Library panel, which contains all of the possible story elements that we might want to use in our story. And in the bottom left here, we can see the Game Object panel, which shows us all of the game objects that exist in the module currently. And in the right-hand side, we can see the Story Editor panel, which holds a list of all of the scripting elements being used in our story. The first cause and effect pattern that we're going to add to our story today is going to add some depth to the game world by making it seem as though there is a creaky floorboard by the stairwell. To do that, we're going to use the trigger that is located by the stairwell. We're going to want to use a cause, which is when that trigger is entered, which would be this one here. So to start using a cause, I'm going to click on it and I'm going to drag it into my story. We'll find it in our story right here. You'll notice that this takes the form of a sentence, with part of the sentence not quite being filled out. And that's because we have to tell ScriptEase which particular trigger we want this to apply to. So now we move down to our Game Object panel, scroll down to the Trigger section. You can find that we've got our creaking trigger here. Click and drag on that, and drop it into the slot that is empty. We see that it changed from red to blue. This means that this particular part of our story has been bound to a particular game object. Game objects are drawn in blue, and known objects, that is, things that we can know through the scripting system but are not necessarily a particular blueprint, are drawn in green. So now we have the start to our cause here, or rather cause effect, and there's not much point in having a cause without an effect. So now we can go into our effects category. We'll clear this search from before. And we're going to click and drag the play a particular sound effect into this particular cause. Of course, we need to bind this sound just like we bound the trigger. So we'll move down to our Game Object Picker again, find sound category here, click and drag that up into the sound slot, and we'll find that it is now bound as well. We also want it to show a visual cue that a sound has been triggered. So what we're going to do is show some text above the player character, which gives us a brown slot. Brown slots are always bound and accept user input. So here we're going to type some text, which will be creak. And that will show the text creak above the player character, and it will play the sound object that is nearby when the creature is entered by some entering creature. So now we'd like to add a little bit of interactivity with our non-player characters. So we'd like to have Dr. Watson and Mrs. Hudson face the door whenever somebody opens that door. So we'll go back into our causes category and type into the search filter open, and this will get us all of the causes that have the word open in them. And our search is turned up when the subject is opened by the opener, which takes both a door or a placeable, which is exactly what we're looking for. So we're going to click on that and drag it across into our story, and we're going to bind the door to be the front door here. I'm going to click on that, drag it across, drop it into the slot here, and move back into the effects category. We'll go and search for the word face, which gives us creature faces, either a creature, blueprint, door, or item, creature to face. We're going to click on that. We're going to drag it into the cause that we just created here, and we'll see that it is now under that cause. Of course, we need to fill in the gaps, so we want Mrs. Hudson to face the creature who opened the door, which could be anyone, and that's why we use the opener known object here. We're going to click on that, we're going to drag it to the slot down here, and we're going to do the same thing for Dr. Watson. Now, whenever the front door is opened by some opener, Dr. Watson and Mrs. Hudson will both face that opener. Sherlock keeps a lot of interesting things about his apartment, and so we're going to want the player to exclaim their surprise when they find this particular book, Bitter Death, A Study in Poisons. So we're going to use the particular cause for when the book pile is closed, which means that they are done searching through it. I'm going to drag that into our story, and we're going to select Sherlock's book pile as being the subject of the close. Now we want the searcher to speak a line, which will be an effect. So we're going to drag this into our cause. The text that we'll have them say is cool, and they will say that as a talk volume. However, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to say that every single time that they search through Sherlock's book. So now we're going to use a question to conditionally speak this text. We'll drag this question into our cause here, and the particular question that we want to ask is a description. The description that we're looking for is whether they have an item. And so we can take this and drag it onto our question. So now we can see that the question's been bound to the has item known object, which has been immediately defined above. Has item describes if some creature has a particular item. We need to supply it with a creature and an item. So the item that we're going to be looking for is Bitter Death, A Study in Poisons. And the creature that we're looking for is going to be the closer. So whether the closer of the book pile has the particular book that we're looking for, then there are two cases, yes and no. We only want them to speak text in the yes case, so we will drag that under there, and now we have conditional actions. And that's all we're going to go over today. This has been your ScriptEase II alpha demo, filmed on May 18th, 2011.